Today we have positive vibes. Change your life by changing your outlook. Simple. I just stopped taking things so fucking seriously and stopped caring about the things that it's not my business to care about. Roll credits. This is true. My entire channel should kind of serve as evidence that this is something I have been practicing or aiming toward. And the way that I changed my outlook in life may be pretty contrarian, I think, to how things are meant or supposed to be looked at as. And I'll go back to my teenage years. Anytime I tell a story about myself, it usually revolves around that chapter in my life because that's when I was doing a lot of my thinking, a lot of my objective thinking. And I think that is something that everyone should be doing at some point. You get to decide exactly what it is that you want for yourself and how you're going to go about it. In my case, I think because I didn't really have a connection that organized that for me in a way that I could consider achievable, you could say that I pretty much gave up on myself. I let myself go intellectually. I remember very vividly that in middle school, I, for the first time ever, for some reason, expressed interest in being into acting, being an actress. And I remember why I felt that way. I remember exactly who inspired me to do all that. But when I thought about it, I was always intimidated by how I was supposed to access higher education. I knew that college is something that I just could not afford. Even if I got some scholarships, the scholarships that my school was providing, if you applied and somehow you were selected, they were trivial amounts. And look, I'm grateful for any kind of money that doesn't have to come out of my pocket. The course in total, it would have cost me, I remember thinking it's just a car loan. Let's say that it was between $20 to $30,000. I sincerely forget. I also had conflicts with what I should do based on cost. What I really wanted to do deep down was geology. So I said to myself, well, science degrees are expensive. How about a cheaper one? Out of all of my interests, how about the cheaper one? And ultimately, the cost was still way beyond what I was feeling comfortable taking. What I also thought about were things like, if there's an emergency, and let's say something happens to my mom, something happens to me, anything like that, any kind of disruption that may interfere with how my funds are injected into this thing, what am I going to do? And it just so happened that the pandemic hit. And you know who wasn't stressed and who wasn't affected over student loans? Me. I will never forget a post from a friend who, she was almost in her mid 40s by the time that she finished paying off for her degree that she got like back in the 90s, because of course her life had many turns and twists that ultimately affected her money making ability, and she ended up having to work retail with me. That's how I met her. And I'm like, how is someone who's a degree holder working out here? And I forget what her degree was on, but it was something having to do with history. And she also did something with photography as well. You might call it a degree that doesn't pay, but if this degree exists, clearly there is a demand for expertise out there. I think that regardless of your degree, you should be granted stability financially, especially if you're going to be indebted. But no, life isn't fair. It isn't balanced. And I looked at myself and thought, I don't know how to navigate through difficulties like that. I am a young person. At the time, I was a teenager with no debt, no worries. Why the fuck would I begin to complicate my life if ultimately I may not even get a job with my degree? And maybe the job with my degree is going to be very demanding physically, mentally, hours in my day. Maybe it'll require that I travel. And I'm not willing to do that. And a lot of the positions that were available for geology were engineering stuff. I don't care about engineering. I don't like to be an engineer, like thinking in that capacity. It's just not who I am and what I am. So I felt like having a degree in geology wasn't ultimately what was best for me. And I was also allowing myself to be influenced. I was almost impressed by how jobs like that tend to be like upper tens of thousands of dollars to six-figure salaries. And then I thought, but there's gotta be a catch to that. And boy, would I learn what the catch to that was. I thought, I'm going to carry him this bullshit debt from my teenage years until my midlife. No, fuck that. Even if I wanted my degree in geology, when I thought about the kinds of jobs that are available for me, it doesn't necessarily speak to me. I like knowing and learning and understanding geology, but it doesn't mean that I actually want to go out there in the field and do shit. Same thing with meteorology. I looked at it as, yeah, science classes. I want to know about meteorology. I want to know about the weather because that is so cool. That is interesting. It is important. It affects me. But ultimately, when I thought of the degree, I said to myself, I'm looking at this as I'm specializing on this topic, but I do not necessarily want to work on this topic. What do I do? What do I really want to work for? How do I really want to work? And I always told myself that I want to live within my means, within my actual necessities. I never wanted a house, for instance, because I feel like houses tend to tie you down. And politically, I know that there's supposed to be a means for you to eventually be able to be a little bit more comfortable, be able to retire, be financially in better shape, because you won't be able to work in your 50s and 60s and 70s the same way that you're working when you're 18 through maybe 40-ish or so. And God forbid if something happens to you between all that. Let's say you get sick, let's say you get injured, like break your back, dislocate a shoulder, something. Let's say you just fuck up a body part. Then what? That is going to diminish your competitiveness and your ability to serve at a job in general. I kept telling myself that this is going to be brutal, and I just wasn't willing to take part in it because I just could not understand the point for me. I understood the point of specializing in a degree that's actually useful for the betterment of society, for the betterment of the community. But something I also thought about very critically was that I carried with me a lot of pain from being neglected. I was super lonely. I spent most of my time alone. My mom, all she could do was work because she didn't have any support. And I noticed that maybe that's where I started losing my drive. I started losing my motivation because everything I was doing was just independent and I was on autopilot. I went through school telling myself, in order for me to not hear mom get upset and yell at me, I gotta make straight A's. And I never really thought about why I was making straight A's. I just looked at it as it is good for me to make A's so that teachers do not confront me, so that my mom doesn't yell at me. But I really wasn't thinking about what that high score meant. Sure, I made straight A's, but it's not like those straight A's had meaning to me outside of I can test well. I can remember information that you can ask me a question about and I can recite to you what the right answer is. But it's not like I was exactly associating that right answer with what happens out here in real life. The only way I could do that was with health classes. Say, don't smoke because it'll do this to you. So then I said, okay, I don't need to be convinced. I saw what it did to my grandfather. I don't want that for me. Anything that I could apply immediately, I was convinced by. And another thing I guess I could say is the laws of motion. I think I was a good driver of cars right off the bat the moment I was thinking scientifically as my mom drove. The acceleration, rounding the curves at a low speed, slowing down when it's raining, little things like that. Anything that I could apply, I said to myself, I learned this in theory because of school, but when I'm out here in the field in practicality, I can make the connection. But just because I make the connection doesn't mean I can necessarily build on it. Let's say that I understand all of the principles of electricity. Just because I understand that doesn't mean I can make anything with that. Or I'm not one of those computer people who can code and go into some file on the computer and completely alter the computer setup, the display, software, anything like that. I'm just not that kind of person. The way that I define my intellectual capacity is more of whatever I feel resonates with me is what I will absorb, is what I will hold on to me, because it's information that's actually useful and impactful for me to get by. But when it comes to being involved in society, I only saw it with eyes of resentment, because I looked at my father and I'm like, okay, he was a cop and everything, but he never showed up in my life. He was never there for me, and I was fucking lonely. My mom, same thing. She was a fantastic teacher. She was good at it. She had her recognitions and accolades, but I paid the price because I had to be, to an extent, neglected. And she tried to be there for me, but unfortunately, the version of her that I got was the stressed, post work, energy is drained. She's pushing herself, getting by. Her patience is going to be a little shorter. And all I could think about was diminishing her problems, which was okay, let me not bring bad grades and let me make sure that I can understand things on my own, because I shouldn't try to count on her because she is tired. She wants me to be independent so that she doesn't have to worry about me. So instead, she can focus on our survival. That shit hurts. My outlook in life ultimately changed to I don't care what people say about how much potential I have, how much talent I have, and how much it shouldn't go to waste. I don't even remember what the fuck my talents were supposed to be back then. I always felt weird that mom used to say, why don't you change jobs? You're really good with the computer. Why don't you do this and that? And I'm like, Ma, I'm not as good with the computer as you think. My own computer, which has 2020's software in it, some shit in it confuses me. At work, my computer, sometimes I have to ask my managers how to access shit on the server because I didn't understand shit. I learned what a server was at my job. Like, it finally helped me see it as some kind of web of computers within our network. And only if you're in our server, you are being served the information from the company through that network. And that's why I cannot just use my average phone or my average computer to access those portals. That vocabulary I just used is vocabulary that I had heard in passing in school, but it wasn't until I saw a developed application at work in play being used and being altered that I was finally able to make the connection of what I picked up on my computer classes and then the way my managers were describing shit to me and how I finally pieced it together. But mom believes that just because I can type pretty fast and because I know how to do basic things, such as accessing my email, downloading a file, sending it to another printer and printing it out, that boom, I have skill. And I don't remember spreadsheets. I don't remember how to do those formulas. I don't remember databases were my favorite ones to use. They were easier because you're just doing data entry. But if you were to tell me create a database, I don't remember how to do any of that shit. And I'm appalled by that because I looked at it as this is information that I know is going to be useful given the presence of computers in our day to day. But ultimately, my skills were never really practiced. And here at home, I can think of instances when I could use a database, but I don't use it. I could use a spreadsheet, but I don't use it. I wouldn't even know how to start. And on top of that, even if I wanted to, I don't have that program. And at least as of the year, was it 2007? I think those programs were like $60, $80. The entire package of Microsoft Works, something like that. That shit was expensive. I don't have that kind of money on me. And the little bit that I do have, I don't want to spend on that. What I do, I pull out a piece of paper and I draw charts and I trust my handwriting more than carrying my computer with me everywhere or relying on my phone to do it. I'm just really old school like that. I'm in that weird transition period between people were still doing things by hand, but computers were being encouraged and adopted more. I'm just lucky and happy and blessed that I was able to be more self-reliant on my physical art more than the computer. And sometimes I tell my manager, hey, I wrote this on this piece of paper. It looks like shit, of course, because my handwriting is not neat and it's not straight. This information, throw it in the computer, format it like this and that. This needs a table, this needs a box, this needs to be a chart, this needs maybe a little symbol over here, this needs a different color. Do it. It's not like I can get on the computer and get that done in fewer than 5 fucking hours. I don't want to be taking long trying to figure out where my buttons are. It goes back to that one video that I made in which I described your silent talents, invisible talents, and how if you don't decide something, someone else is going to try to decide for you. I'm just happy that I think the biggest trial I was facing in my life was that nobody was present for me, like full time, observing me, suggesting things to me that revolved around my interests. But I resisted the urge of being manipulated into picking something that I knew wasn't going to make me happy, but I'm doing it because of peer pressure. Computer work, for instance. I always said I hate computers. I don't like sitting down. I don't like looking at this goddamn screen. When these things freeze, or the file gets corrupted or lost, or power goes out and it didn't save, I get angry. Nothing that is non-living makes me angrier than a computer fucking malfunctioning. I can't help it. It makes my chest get tight. I can feel my temples like tensing up, and I can feel my eyes bulging out of my sockets. And I just feel physically that immense stress and anger. And that's how I broke my computer at the time back in 2014. I was pissed off. That bitch was not loading and I punched it. I broke my $700 computer at the time and I felt no remorse whatsoever. If anything, I was happy because now I don't have that fucking thing to access. And because I couldn't access it, it could never stress me again. And I just remembered when mom realized that I didn't have a computer because I broke it, and I told her how it happened, she was like, ugh, that is just such a bad attitude. And I'm like, wonder where that comes from. I had no idea at the time that I was lashing out because that is what neglect does to you. But at the time, I hadn't pieced that part of myself yet. But in a sense, moments like that, episodes like that, is what convinced me that I need to work hard at not complicating my life because I am not resourceful enough to adopt a change in my status. The fewer responsibilities I have, the better, the simpler that my life is going to be. And I prefer that because the moment that you start taking on more responsibility, that's going to have a cost somewhere. And there are some costs, like I've said numerous times, I am not willing to pay. The first thing that it was going to affect me with was my personal time. I was going to have an even tougher time establishing a relationship, which to me is one of my top 3 favorite, most important things too. And I cannot imagine a life in which I could have made it work if I was going to be so unavailable. I don't play with that. That is the level of the attitude problems I had with computers. Now at work, I never get mad at the computer because I'm like, shit, I'm getting paid for this. I get paid by the hour. This bitch can take its time. It can not load for all I care because then I'm gonna have to dial somebody to come here or take me to another computer and set that computer up for me. I'm being served. My outlook in life, in conclusion, to pretty much wrap everything up, I wanted to describe that so you know what led up to me in the present. I just said to myself, I just want to live life simply. If I'm not going to be serving the community in a significant way, this is the favor I can make the community. I can avoid accidents. I can avoid going missing, getting hurt, being ill in a way that requires that I get medically intervened. And I hope that nobody does that because I'm not gonna pay for that shit. Y'all better let me die. I'm going to not operate something I'm not licensed for, say a boat. Anytime it storms or anything like that, I'm not going to be out there endangering myself. See what I mean? I prevent problems so that I don't have to occupy other people to solve them for me. I very seldom need help. So I looked at it as, you know what? At least for someone who's not going to make anything of herself, like in a meaningful, impactful way, because I'm not willing to, then how about if I don't demand things from others, if I don't absorb things from others? The worst I do to you is ask you to cook me my meal, and I will overpay for it in the name of you cooking it as I'm driving to your location so that I don't make the mess at home. I don't have to clean up afterward. I don't have to put the ingredients together. I don't have to be vigilant over the kitchen and how something is cooking. You're pretty much taking that task away from me. It's bad for me, and it's definitely not as good tasting as what I put together here in my kitchen, but it's the exchange. It's the price I'm willing to pay. Eventually, this is going to reflect on my health, but that I look at it as we all have a fucking expiry date. The next time I will disrupt somebody or bother somebody, it'll be when you have to figure out what the fuck to do with my body. But outside of that, I believe that I minimize my impact on the community. I'm not lining up at no offices looking for benefits, demanding benefits, or post office. I guess that's the other place I occupy anytime I gotta send something out. And the only reason I do that is because realistically, I don't have a vehicle that I can operate to deliver stuff directly myself. If I could skip my work so that I could drive or fly some states away and personally deliver everything I sell, even though logistically it would suck that it would consume so much of my time to deliver one order, I would be willing to do it because I'm doing the footwork. I'm actually moving myself to hand to someone something that I sold them. But, the post office needed to exist so that we can handle that traffic in practicality. Because imagine if everybody had to leave their posts, had to leave town to deliver whatever document, whatever letter, whatever package personally. And what about the disabled people who go to the post office and they can drop that off and they don't have to do this marathon to get their stuff delivered? My outlook in life simply became, I am going to avoid problems so that I don't have problems that I cannot handle, and so that I don't have to occupy other people dealing with me when they could be dealing, I guess, with other people who, for whatever reason, they legit need this intervention. I don't need this intervention. I just decided that as opposed to living depressed, stressed, frustrated, disappointed, affected, that I wasn't achieving anything, I said to myself, I am going to, at the very least, exist to help others make it in whatever it is that they're aiming for. And my favorite example would be management. There are some people who are looking for promotions. Because I have been at my post for so long, I believe I am well qualified to show them how they can get started. What are things that they could keep in mind? Inspire them. or at least motivate them. Or when they're having a day that's super challenging for them and I can feel their frustration, just be like, hey, just know that the shit like this happens. Don't forget that every day cannot be perfect, but today we have special challenges. Where do you need me? What would make this easier? Who do we need to get? Or where should I redirect my efforts? Or perhaps in the rarest of occasions, but if the situation truly calls for it, based off my experience, I can even offer, hey, if you need me for an extra 15 minutes, an extra half hour, I'm willing to do it today because I see the need, I see the emergency, I see the demand, and I don't think it's fair that this is going to break you. It shouldn't. Little things like that. That's the time that I'm willing to disrupt my life. But I also see that it's not only benefiting me and my paycheck, but I immediately, instantly see how this is good for the team. There are other times in which I decline to assist during the storm that we're going through in the shift because there are some people I believe need to be roughed up in the same manner that I was roughed up back in my day, and that led to me being the type of worker I am today. The one who's confident, the one who doesn't get intimidated, the one who doesn't bawl her eyes out when someone wildens up at me ever so slightly, and the one who doesn't take this shit personally anymore. I can go home, decompress, and let it go after I have punched out. I really don't think about that place anymore. It's something that I realized I had to actually work toward and focus on because I wasn't this way. I wasn't always this way. And I have the evidence here of how there were things that were frustrating me. And now I can say that I sometimes concern myself with how unbothered by shit I am. And sometimes I wonder if there's something wrong with me or if I'm just not a good person, like if I don't care. But then I look at it as, no, I gotta remember how much I had to suffer, how much I had to pay for me to make it to where I am today. And where I am today is not great, but I can say that it's better than how I was feeling before. I thought that the stuff that was haunting me years ago was something I was condemned to suffer from for the rest of my life. And now I can say that there's a lot of that I have let go of. And I want to say that I see the point now. My outlook is simply that I'm getting by, I'm doing okay, and I think that's fair considering the opportunities that I had and the opportunities that I didn't have and the opportunities I created for myself. That was something I was never willing to do, giving myself credit for what I have actually, I guess, implemented for myself, invented for myself to make it better for me. And I hope that made sense for you guys. This is really nothing new that I'm saying that I haven't said before about myself. But again, my favorite thing to do is connecting things. That was the kind of student I was. I could take what I learned and apply it to either a discourse or apply it to an actual moment to keep myself from, I don't know, getting hurt, getting lost, breaking something. And I find that some people's struggle is because they don't know how to react to things. I want to say that I have taken the time to figure out how to react to things. I'm okay with death. I'm okay with people who have just given birth, even though I've never witnessed it or experienced it myself. I understand people who lose their vehicles. I understand people who lose their health. Those little things. I wanted to be someone who is resourceful so that I know how to react and how to prepare for something. And I have observed folks who I would expect who have more experience than me, who would be better equipped than me to deal with these things, not doing so. And I think the factor is that they literally have not had that time to think about those things, or they never had someone present in their life to challenge them into thinking about those things. There are times in which I may ask someone something mildly basic and they'll be like, I never thought about that before. That's a good question. I'm like, okay, I think I understand why I am here at this moment in time. I'm not your savior, but maybe I can challenge you in a way that when you reconsider things or evaluate something, you know what path to take. See what I mean? I'm not the resolver. I'm not the savior. I'm not the rescuer. But I can be the one who maybe shows you the wedge so that you can release it or loosen it up. And by extension, loosen yourself and just chill out a bit. Well, there you guys have it. That's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I would be very interested to know if you have experienced something like this. Something like when you were a child, you were convinced that you were just going to follow certain paths, but you had to change your route because, let it be, your resources were lacking, your knowledge was limited, or because you acted out of fear, you acted out of a lack of confidence, someone influenced you into something you didn't want and you regretted it, anything at all. How did this play out for you? Have you changed your outlook? All right, that's it. Bye.